London, 1888. The British Empire stood at the height of its power. Its capital was the largest city on earth, a place of wealth, industry, and opportunity. But only a few streets away from its grand buildings another London existed. One hidden in poverty, crime, disease, and fear. This was Whitechapel, a district in London's East End where thousands struggled to survive. Entire families crowded into single rooms. Work was scarce. Violence was common. Many women turned to prostitution, not by choice, but because it was often the only way to earn enough money for a night's lodging. It was here, during the autumn of 1888, that one of history's most infamous killers emerged, a murderer whose identity remains unknown more than a century later. The world would come to know him as Jack the Ripper. The first widely accepted victim was Mary Ann Nichols. In the early hours of August 31st, her body was discovered on Bucks Row. She had suffered deep wounds to her throat. The injuries suggested the attack had been swift, violent, and deliberate. Police initially believed they were dealing with an isolated murder. They were wrong. Only 8 days later, another woman was found, Annie Chapman. She had been killed in the backyard of a house on Hanbury Street. Like Nichols, her throat had been cut. But this time, the killer had gone further. The body had been severely mutilated. The brutality shocked even experienced officers. Word spread quickly through Whitechapel. People began locking their doors. Women avoided walking alone after dark. Fear settled over the neighborhood. Then came the night that would become known as the double event, September 30th, 1888. Within the span of a single night, 2 women were murdered. The first, Elizabeth Stride, was found in Dutfield's yard. Unlike the previous victims, her body showed fewer injuries. Many investigators believe the killer was interrupted before he could continue the attack. Less than an hour later, less than a mile away, the body of Catherine Eddowes was discovered in Mitre Square. The injuries were even more severe than before. It appeared the killer had struck twice, in a single night. The city was horrified. Just weeks later, on November 9th, the final widely accepted victim was found, Mary Jane Kelly. Unlike the others, she was killed inside her own room. What investigators found there was unlike anything they had seen before. The crime scene was so disturbing that even hardened detectives struggled to describe it. Many historians believe this was the killer's most violent attack, and his last. These 5 women, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, became known as the Canonical Five. While some researchers argue that Jack the Ripper may have claimed additional victims, historians generally agree that these 5 murders share the strongest similarities. The victims were killed within just a few months. All in or around Whitechapel, all under the cover of darkness, and all with a level of violence that terrified Victorian London. Police flooded Whitechapel with officers. Rewards were offered. Thousands of people were questioned. Every rumor, every witness, and every suspicious stranger was investigated. Yet despite one of the largest murder investigations in British history, the killer simply vanished. No arrest, no confession, no name, only a mystery that has endured for more than 130 years. In the weeks that followed, the investigation would become even stranger. Letters claiming to be from the killer began arriving. Newspapers fueled public panic, and one name would capture the world's imagination forever: Jack the Ripper. By October of 1888, Whitechapel was living in fear. As the sun went down, the streets emptied. Women avoided walking alone. Shopkeepers closed early. Parents hurried their children indoors. Everyone was asking the same question: who was Jack the Ripper? The Metropolitan Police launched one of the largest investigations Victorian Britain had ever seen. Hundreds of officers were assigned to Whitechapel. They interviewed thousands of witnesses, They searched lodging houses, questioned butchers, doctors, sailors, and anyone whose movements seemed suspicious. More than 2,000 people were interviewed. Hundreds were investigated in detail. Dozens were detained. Yet every lead ended the same way. Nothing. Then, the letters began arriving. Newspapers, police stations, and public officials started receiving messages from someone claiming to be the killer. Most were dismissed as cruel hoaxes, but one letter changed history. Dated September 25, 1888, it began with the words, "Dear Boss." The writer mocked the police, claimed responsibility for the murders, and signed the letter, Jack the Ripper. Whether the author was truly the killer, or simply someone seeking attention, has never been proven. But the newspapers published the name. Almost overnight, it spread across Britain. And then, around the world, the unknown murderer finally had a name. Just weeks later, another package arrived. This time, it included half of what appeared to be a preserved human kidney. Alongside it was a letter beginning with the words, "From Hell." Unlike previous letters, this one was badly written. It contained no signature, and its crude language made investigators wonder if this message might actually have come from the murderer. The kidney was examined by doctors. Some believed it could have belonged to Catherine Eddowes, whose left kidney had been removed during her murder. Others argued there was simply no way to prove such a connection. More than a century later, experts still disagree. The investigation faced enormous challenges. There were no fingerprints, no DNA testing, no surveillance cameras, no forensic science as we know it today. Crime scenes were often contaminated by crowds, journalists, and even curious onlookers. Evidence handling was inconsistent. Witness statements frequently contradicted one another. Some people came forward hoping to help. Others lied, hoping for attention, or reward money. Separating fact from fiction became almost impossible. One clue, however, sparked years of debate. Near one of the murder scenes, police discovered a piece of Catherine Eddowes' apron. Above it, written on a nearby wall, was a message in chalk. Its exact wording has been debated ever since. Police feared the message could inflame anti-Jewish violence, which was already rising in London's East End. Before daylight, the writing was erased on the orders of senior officers. No official photograph was taken. Only written copies survived. To this day, no one knows whether the message had anything to do with the murders, or was simply graffiti already on the wall. As autumn came to an end, the killings stopped. No confirmed canonical 5 victim was murdered after Mary Jane Kelly. Had the killer died, been imprisoned for another crime, left London, or simply chosen to stop? Police never found the answer, but over the decades, that didn't stop people from trying. More than 200 suspects have been proposed. Some were doctors, some were butchers, some were artists. Some were members of high society. Each theory claimed to reveal the killer's identity, yet none has ever been accepted as conclusive. More than 135 years later, the investigation is still open. Not in police files, but in history itself. And the biggest question of all remains unanswered. Who was Jack the Ripper? When the murders finally stopped, Whitechapel slowly returned to normal. The newspapers moved on. New crimes filled the headlines. But one question refused to disappear. Who was Jack the Ripper? For more than a century, historians, detectives, journalists, and amateur investigators have searched for the answer. The result is a list of more than 200 suspects. Among the most discussed was Aaron Kosminski, a Polish barber living in Whitechapel at the time of the murders. Historical police documents suggest that some investigators privately suspected him. He was later admitted to a mental asylum, where he remained for the rest of his life. In recent years, DNA tests performed on a shawl said to be connected to one of the victims, have been claimed to identify Kosminski. But many forensic experts dispute those conclusions. They argue that the shawl's origin cannot be conclusively verified, and that contamination over more than a century makes any DNA results difficult to interpret. Because of these concerns, the evidence is not considered definitive. Another frequently discussed suspect, Montague John Druitt, a barrister and schoolteacher. He died shortly after the final canonical murder. Some senior police officials later suggested he may have been the killer. Yet, no direct evidence has ever linked him to the crimes. Others have pointed to Michael Ostrog, a career criminal, or Francis Tumblety, an American doctor who fled Britain shortly after the murders. Again, the evidence remains largely circumstantial. Every suspect seems to answer one question, while creating several more. Modern technology has transformed criminal investigations. DNA profiling, digital databases, advanced forensic analysis. These tools have solved countless cold cases. But Jack the Ripper presents a unique problem. Much of the original evidence has been lost. Some items were destroyed. Others were contaminated long before modern forensic standards existed. Witnesses are long gone. Crime scenes disappeared over a century ago beneath the streets of modern London. Without reliable physical evidence, there may never be enough information to identify the killer with certainty. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of the case is that history often remembers the murderer more than the victims. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. 5 women, each with families, dreams, and lives that extended far beyond the headlines of 1888. Today, historians increasingly focus on telling their stories, rather than glorifying the man who took them. More than 135 years have passed. Books continue to be written. Television documentaries are still produced. New suspects continue to emerge, and debates continue across the world. But despite generations of investigation, no court has ever identified Jack the Ripper. No confession has ever been verified. No theory has been proven beyond reasonable doubt. The identity of history's most infamous serial killer remains officially unknown. Perhaps one day, a forgotten document, or a genuine piece of preserved evidence will finally reveal the truth. Or perhaps the answer vanished forever into the fog-covered streets of Victorian London. Jack the Ripper remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries, not because of a lack of suspects, but because after more than a century, no one can say with certainty who he really was. What do you think? Was Jack the Ripper one of the famous suspects, or someone whose name has been lost to history? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy documentaries exploring history's greatest mysteries and unsolved crimes, consider subscribing, because sometimes the most fascinating stories are the ones that still have no ending.